the camera so we can see each other. The Honorable Dr. Charlotte Mills from University of Reading, UK as speaker. The Honorable Mr. Yana Cahyana, PhD as moderator. The Honorable Dr. Insinyur Muhammad Jali MS as Head of Food Industrial Technology Department, Pajajaran University. The Honorable Dr. Tita Rialita SSC MSI as Head of Food Technology Study Program, Pajajaran University. The Honorable All Lecturer of Food Technology, Pajajaran University and University of Reading. All students of Food Technology, Pajajaran University, and also all distinguished participants. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the general lecture with the topic of dietary nitrate and cardiovascular health. First of all, let's praise the Almighty God for His blessing, so we're able to attend this general lecture, which held by Food Technology Study Program. It's been a great honor for me, Aman Hilmi, to be here as your Master of Ceremony and to welcome each and every one of you in this event. Before we start out the general lecture, let's start this by praying first, so the event that we will hold on this day will run well without any obstacle at all. And the prayer will be led by Dr. Anda Zaida, MSI. Mr. Zaida, time is yours. I'm sorry, Mr. Zaida, you're still on mute. Okay.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Ladies and gentlemen and all participants of general lecture, especially apologies for Dr. Charles Mills. I received the prayer in Bahasa Indonesia and I'm afraid I will lose the spirit words of the prayer. A'udzubillahi minasyaitonirrajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Allahumma shalli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin hamdan yuafi ni'amahu wa yukafi mazida. Ya Rabbana lakal hamdu kama yanbaghi li jalalika wajhikal karim wa ajmi sultan. Allahumma ij'al hadha rizqan halalan tayyiban. Oh Allah, make our rizqi has halal and tayyib. La hisaban wa la tabi'atan fi which do not post calculation in the future and then give bad effect in hereafter. Allahumma rizukna taufiq ta'ati, ya Allah, anugerahkanlah kepada kami bimbingan untuk selalu taat. Wa bu'dal maksiati, dan menjauhi maksiat serta ketulusan dalam niat. Wa irfana hurmah, dan angkatlah kami dengan kehormatan. Wa akrimna bil huda wal istiqamah, dan muliakanlah kami dengan petunjuk dan keteguhan hati. Wasadid al-sinatana bis shawabi wal hikmah, dan kuatkan lisan kami dengan kebenaran dan hikmah. Wamla qulubuna bil ilmi wal ma'rifah, dan penuhi hati kami dengan ilmu dan ma'rifat. Wadamullah. Wa tahhir butunana minal harami wa syubhah, dan bersihkan perut kami dari haram dan syubhat. Wafuf aidiana anizul bimasyifah, dan tahankan tangan kami dari kekuasaan dan jabatan yang kena penuh dengan kezaliman dan kesewenangan. Waqdud absarana anil fujuri wal hiyanah, dan pejamkan pandangan kami dari kejahatan dan khianat. Wasdud asma'ana anil laghwi wal ghibah, dan tutupkanlah pendengaran kami dari yang tidak berguna dan gunjingan. Watafaddal ala ulama bizzuhdi wan nasihah, dan anugerahkan kepada kami, kepada ulama kami, kepada guru-guru kami, dosen-dosen kami, lecturer, dan guru besar kami, kezuhudan dan tidak terlalu cinta dunia dan nasihat. Wa 'alal muta'allimina bizzuhdi war rahbah, dan kepada para pelajar, mahasiswi, student, kesungguhan dan kecintaan akan pengetahuan yang menggebu. Wa 'alal mustami'ina bil ittiba'i wal mau'idhah, dan para mustami, pendengar, teman, partisipan, kepatuhan dan kesadaran yang menghujat. Wa 'alal mardal muslimina bisyifa'i wa raha, dan para muslimin dan muslimat yang sakit saat ini kena COVID, kesembuhan dan ketentraman. Wa 'ala mautahum birra'fati war rahmah, dan orang-orang yang meninggal karena COVID, kelembutan dan kasih sayang. Walal masayihina bil waqar was sakinah. Dan orang-orang tua kami yang rentan kena penyakit COVID, semua kedamaian dan ketentraman. Walas syababi bil anabi wat taubah, dan para pemuda dan pemudi kehati-hatian, rasa penyesalan dan taubat. Wa ala nisa'i bil haya'i wal 'iffah, dan para wanita rasa malu dan kesucian. Wa alal aghniya'i bit tawadhu'i was saha, dan para orang kaya yang rendah hati dan kedermawanan. Wa 'alal fuqara'i bis sabi war qanaah, dan orang-orang yang kurang mampu kesabaran dan kerelaan. Wa 'alal umara bil 'adli wasyafaqah, dan para pemimpin keadilan dan kasih sayang. Wa 'alal ra'ayati bil insaf khusus sirah, dan masyarakat umum keadilan dan akhlak yang baik. Sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi at-tayyibati tahiri walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Mr. Zaida. Ladies and gentlemen, let me deliver the structure of the event today. As follow, the first agenda is opening. The second agenda is the welcoming speech from Dr. Tita Rialta, STP MSI, as Head of Food Technology Study Program. The third agenda is photo session. The fourth agenda is the general lecture, which will be delivered by Dr. Charlotte Mills as speaker and Mr. Yana Cahyana, PhD, as moderator. The fifth agenda is the submission of certificates for moderator and speaker, and the last agenda is closing. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite Dr. Tita Rialta, STP MSI, as Head of Food Technology Study Program, to deliver the welcoming speech. Mrs. Tita Rialta, time is yours.
Thank you, MC Amani. Good afternoon, everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Best wishes to all of us. Hopefully, we are in good health. First, I would like to thank to all lecturers, researchers, practitioners, and students who have attended in this event. Today, we will take part in third series international public lecture from the Food Technology Study Program Pajajaran University with the theme Dietary Nitrate and Cardiovascular Health. It is our honor to have the speaker today, Dr. Charlotte Mills from Reading University, United States, United Kingdom. Thank you for your willingness, Dr. Charlotte. And also thanks to Mr. Yana, PhD, who will be the moderator today. The purpose of this event, again, is to share the knowledge widely to the public, especially academic society, to be able to improve the knowledge. We hope in the future there will be more cooperation in the academic field between Pajajaran University and Reading University, which generally can increase the quality of education, especially in Indonesia. Hopefully this event goes well and useful for all of us. Amin, amin, rabbal alamin. That's all that I can say. I hereby declare the public lecture officially is open. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Mrs. Tita, for the speech. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the high time to capture our moment today. So I would like to ask all of you to turn on the camera and give your best smile, because now we're going to take a picture together for the documentation. Okay. Please do turn on the camera. Okay, ready? The cue in me. Okay, I'm still waiting. Okay. Don't forget to give your best smile. 3, 2, 1. Okay, once again. 3, 2, 1. Okay, thank you so much for your participation. And ladies and gentlemen, that was only the beginning. Now we come to the main point, which is the general lecture with the topic of dietary nitrate and cardiovascular health. It's my pleasure to introduce our moderator today. He is one of my lecturer in food technology Pajajaran University, Mr. Yana Cahyana, STP DA PhD, as known as Mr. Yana. He completed his Bachelor on Food and Nutrition Technology at Bogor Agricultural Institute. He completed his Magister on Food Science at the University of Montpellier, France. He completed his doctorate degree on Food Science and Nutrition at University of Reading, UK. He did a lot of research, and one of the research is the application of high SDS banana flour to pasta food products, and he was awarded an International Scientific Publication Award from LPDP. Without any further ado, I would like to invite our moderator today to guide this general lecture, Mr. Yana Cahyana, PhD. Time is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. And good morning for our speaker. For your information, our speaker is in UK now. It is in the morning. So yeah, I confused. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Yana Cahyana. I'm a lecturer at University Pajajaran. It's great to see so many people here attending on the webinar, and I will lead the webinar for approximately 1 hour and a half. For the next 1 hour and a half. Well, let me introduce our speaker today. She is Dr. Charlotte Elizabeth Mills. She is a lecturer and researcher at University of Reading. In fact, I met her about 10 years ago at Reading. We were a PhD student. We were a PhD student at the same university, and yeah, I know her. So I know her, and I know her experience. So I'm sure that you're gonna love her talk today with such experience. Let me read her short or her brief biography as an introduction. So our speaker, after finishing her PhD at the University of Reading, she did a postdoctoral research at King College, London, UK, on cardiometabolic health impact of commercial interesterification of dietary fats, and also on dietary nitrate as reduced arterial stiffness in people with or at risk of type 2 diabetes. Her interest now is on plant bioactive components on cardiometabolic health, and then she also currently supervise PhD student as primary supervisor as well as secondary supervisor, and she has been invited as invited speaker at several places like in Australia. She also published a great deal of publications. So I just read 3 or 4 her publication on, for example, here on acute exposure up to nitrogen dioxide elevate plasma nitrate concentration and decreased blood pressure. That's the her publication. And another one is grapefruit enhances the blood pressure lowering effect of dietary nitrate. And the other one, for example, a randomized factorial trial to reduce arterial stiffness independently of blood pressure, proof of concept. So I think she has so many publications. I just read 3 of them, and I told you that with such experience, I'm really sure that you're gonna love her talk today. Okay, without any further ado, please welcome Dr. Charlotte Mills.
Thanks, Yana. I'm just going to try and share my screen one more time. I think I may have fixed the problem. So let me just see if this is going to work. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Aha, hooray, success.
Well done.
I'm glad I fixed it. It was locked. So I just need to. Lovely. So first of all, I just want to start off by saying thank you so much for inviting me to talk. It's such a shame that I can't come in person, but it's still brilliant that we can still run this kind of event with all the kind of chaos that's happening in the world at the moment.
Dr.
I don't know what...
Sorry for interrupting you. I forget to tell something to our audience.
Go on, go ahead.
Yes, sir. If the audience you want to ask, you can type just in the chat room, or maybe you can raise your hand in the Q&A session. Yeah. So sorry for interrupting you.
That's all right. No, not a problem at all. So as Yana explained, I'm going to kind of give a talk on dietary nitrate and cardiovascular health. I appreciate this might be a bit of a more unusual topic for your department, but hopefully I can make it accessible to everybody. And please just feel free at the end to shout any questions that that you have as we go along. Hang on a sec. It's not letting me. There we go. So I wanted to just start off like introducing where I've come from. So, I mean, as Yana said, we both attended the University of Reading. I did both my undergraduate and my PhD at Reading, and it's a quite a big town outside of London, just to the west of London. And it's about 25 minutes on the train. It's really near Heathrow. It's a fantastic location. But I guess the biggest selling point for me of the university is the campus is absolutely gorgeous. So if no other reason to visit, come and see our campus because it really is stunning, as you can see from the photos here. Our department, so the Department of Food and Nutritional Sciences, which is where I'm based, is kind of split into 3 different research groups. We have the Hugh Sinclair Human Nutrition Research Group, Food Research Group, and then the Food and Microbial Sciences Group as well. And although these are kind of distinct groups, they overlap somewhat. So I'm working a lot across all 3 groups. So just very briefly to introduce these, so the Human Nutrition Research Group are researching things like cardiometabolic health, diet and cognition, immunity, appetite regulation, personalized nutrition. And we have this absolutely fantastic clinical research suite. And this is where a lot of my research happens. So it's nice for you to see a photo of that, because a lot of the stuff that I talk about in the next kind of few slides is going to be based in this unit. Our food research group is probably more aligned with your department. So it's carrying out things like food chemistry, food technology, waste valorization, sensory sciences. And they also have their own kind of very nice facility. They have a pilot processing plant, which is fantastic. So they can do a lot of research there. They work with industry a lot in this kind of pilot factory. And then the third group is microbial sciences, and they research anything from prebiotics and the gut microbiota, and they have these fantastic really bespoke gut models to do some of this research, all the way through to microbial food safety. So our department spans quite a large breadth of food and nutritional sciences. So that's the department. So my own research, as was introduced perfectly, is really aiming to maximize the impact, the cardiometabolic health impact of plant bioactives. So things like dietary nitrate, which I'll speak about here, polyphenols, citrulline, and to really try and understand what's driving these effects, so how they're having that effect on health, and also looking at ways to maximize them to make these effects even better. And this is by things like synergy, so combining nutrients together, optimizing from farm to fork, so looking at growing conditions, processing conditions, or cooking conditions that will really maximize the health effects that are observed. And then finally looking at targeted approaches, so this idea of stratified nutrition. So it's not a one size fits all, but targeting specific populations with specific treatments or nutritional treatments. And so my research kind of combines, it has like an interface of analytical and clinical science. So analytically, I'm mainly using things like chromatography to analyze foods, but also to analyze biological samples which are collected in the human trials. And then the clinical side is obviously carrying out intervention trials. So feeding people some foods or a nutrient and looking at what happens afterwards. And these are just some examples of some of the things I've worked with. Jana mentioned some of them earlier. My PhD was on coffee, and I still do a hell of a lot of work on coffee. It's kind of my little pet, so coffee polyphenols and health. And then I guess the main other thing that I work on is dietary nitrate. And obviously that's the focus of this talk, and it links in a little bit to the paper that was introduced on nitrogen dioxide. So I'll mention that towards the end of the talk. So I just want to introduce, I always have this slide in here, but I mean, I'm sure it's no surprise to you for me to say that cardiovascular disease is the world's biggest killer. It's a huge problem internationally, and actually as countries are starting to develop, it's becoming a bigger and bigger problem all across the world. 16.5% of deaths, this is data from 2012, are attributed to hypertension, so high blood pressure, which is a key risk factor for developing cardiovascular disease. Interestingly, behavioural risk factors are accountable for about 80% of this disease. So these are things like smoking, physical exercise, drinking alcohol, and I guess most pertinent to me and my research, diet. So by modifying our diet, we may be able to attenuate some of this cardiovascular disease prevalence. I just wanted to introduce, because it's not always that clear what I'm talking about when I'm talking about cardiovascular diseases. So I'm basically describing any condition that affects blood vessels to the heart. So this could be coronary heart disease, so things like heart attacks, angina, strokes or mini strokes, transischemic attacks, peripheral artery diseases, so diseases of the arteries that are not directly connected to the heart, and also aortic disease. And that's what I mean by cardiovascular diseases. And then you have a set of risk factors, so things which determine the risk of you developing cardiovascular disease. And these are probably no surprise to you. So things like smoking, not being very active, being overweight, things like family history and ethnicity. So there is a kind of genetic element in there, and high blood pressure, which is where a lot of my research focuses around. So if we can modify blood pressure, if we can reduce population's blood pressure, we can essentially reduce their risk of developing cardiovascular disease. So it's a good kind of place to focus. So what is the evidence for diet and blood pressure? Well, there is quite a substantial amount of evidence suggesting that modifying diet can improve blood pressure, so reduce blood pressure. And there's a couple of diets which I'll just touch on here. The first one is the DASH diet. It's diet stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension. And this diet basically describes eating plenty of fruits and vegetables. This is no surprise, plenty of fruits and vegetables, lots of whole grains, and increasing dairy consumption, and eating less of things like salt, sugar, and red meat. The Mediterranean diet, maybe one that you've heard, is very similar. Lots of fruits and vegetables, not so much saturated fat, not so much salt, and not so much sugar. And there are other kind of iterations of these diets. So you may have heard of like the Japanese diet, the Inuit diet, but they all have very similar kind of underlying premise, which is lots of fruits and vegetables, lots of whole grains, and not much kind of salt, sugar, and saturated fat. So what is it within those foods? What is it within the fruits and the vegetables and the whole grains that drives these effects, so that reduces our blood pressure? And there are a number of things, and I don't want to for a second suggest that it's only one thing within these foods, which is really important, because I think, it's a combination of all of these things which are are going to be beneficial to vascular health. And I research on a number of these things. So I've done a bit of work on allicin, which is found in garlic. I'm starting to do a bit on L-citrulline, which is found in really high levels in watermelon. The research around these areas is not so strong. I guess the field of polyphenols is where there's a hell of a lot of research, and it's looking extremely promising that these polyphenolic compounds are able to reduce blood pressure. But actually, obviously, for the talk today, nitrate is where I'm going to focus. So nitrate is found in green leafy vegetables and beetroot. And I guess I want to start off by, first of all, giving a bit of a history lesson. So just to kind of talk you through the origins of nitrate for cardiovascular health and where it all started. I don't know how many of you, if any of you, recognize this man here. It's actually Alfred Nobel, so the namesake of the Nobel Prize. And I mention him because it's quite an interesting story. So a lot of Alfred Nobel's work was using this compound, GTN or nitroglycerin, which is an example of organic nitrate. So this organic nitrate compound is extremely explosive. A lot of his work was trying to develop stable explosives, and he was extremely successful in doing that, and that's why we have the Nobel Prize named after him. But interestingly, I mean, Alfred Nobel notoriously had a number of ailments. He wasn't a particularly healthy man, and one thing he did suffer from was angina. So if you're not familiar with what I mean by angina, it's a condition where you have reduced blood flow to the heart muscles and you get severe chest pain. And one way in which angina is treated is with GTN. So it's with this exact compound that Alfred Nobel was originally researching as an explosive. So ironically, he ended up taking GTN for his angina. So organic nitrate now is used commonly for the treatment of cardiovascular disease. So GTN spray is used very widely. But that's organic nitrate. What I'm going to be talking about is inorganic nitrate. So inorganic nitrate is the stuff that we find in green leafy vegetables and in beetroot. And you can see here from this table, there's a list of vegetables here, and list them from high to low. And those which are really very high are the ones that I've mentioned already. There are also traces, some amount of nitrate found in tap water, and so it's another source if you drink a lot of water in the day as well. I just want to, because I've done a number of talks around in various different countries to different populations, and people don't always know what I'm talking about when I talk about beetroot, and actually it's kind of the key focus of a lot of my research. So I just wanted to clarify. I don't know if you eat much of this in Indonesia, but it's a kind of purpley vegetable which grows underground. I love it. Some people absolutely hate it. It has a very kind of earthy taste. Typically in our research, we're giving it in these kind of beetroot juice shots. So it's 70 milliliters, and you can take it in a couple of mouthfuls. And these shots are perfect because the company who make these have made a nitrate-free control. So we have a perfect control for our research. But that's just in case some of you are like, what the hell are you talking about? This is what I mean when I talk about beetroot. And normally if I'm face to face, I like to bring some shots so people can try. And obviously, often the faces of people are quite disgusted by the taste. So back to the history lesson. So if you're familiar at all with biochemistry or human nutrition, you might be very familiar with this L-arginine-enos-NO pathway. So this reaction here from L-arginine to nitric oxide is happening all the time. I'm just going to turn the laser on. So this part of the reaction is happening all the time in our bodies. L-arginine is using this enzyme enos to make nitric oxide, and nitric oxide is a known vasodilator. So it's very established in doing that. It regulates vascular tone. It is in control of all of the vascular kind of function in our body. And we need this molecule. This is an extremely important molecule for our functioning. Now, historically, nitrite here and nitrate here, these inorganic nitrite and inorganic nitrate, were considered just to be literally just physiologically inert products of nitric oxide. So they were formed from oxidation in the body, but they weren't really considered to do anything particularly important. So they kind of just were formed, and that was it. And Mercado and Higgs kind of published this in the New England Journal of Medicine, which is an extremely high impact journal. And then they literally described them as physiologically inert products of nitric oxide. Even further to that, even as early as 2003, publications were talking about the fact that eating lots of inorganic nitrate, so basically consuming this, didn't increase nitrite and didn't produce nitric oxide. So it was not until very recently that interest started to become more rife in inorganic nitrate for cardiovascular health. And I'll explain a bit more about that now. So we have this pathway. We have the L-arginine eNOS pathway, and that's well established. But then more recently, this backward pathway, so reduction from nitrate to nitrite, has been established to happen in the body. And it was acknowledged that the enterosalivary circulation was really important in this process. And it was some colleagues that I was working with in London who established that the enterosalivary circulation was important, and how they did that. So they first of all fed some people, some volunteers, beetroot juice, and then a nitrate-free control juice. And you can see here that when you consume beetroot juice, the black squares here, you get an increase in circulating nitrite, so this compound here in the body. And I guess I should just highlight now that nitrite is often measured in the blood as a marker of how much nitric oxide is present, because it's very difficult to measure nitric oxide itself because it's very, very reactive. It either oxidizes or reduces very quickly. So they see here that, okay, you drink something, you either consume or drink something high in nitrate and you get a lot of nitrite. Brilliant. How is this happening? Well, so they had an idea that perhaps the enterosalivary circulation was an important system for this. And so what they asked people to do next was they gave everybody juice which was high in nitrate, and asked and on one visit asked the participants to swallow their saliva, and on the next visit they asked people to spit out their saliva. And you can see here when they spat out their saliva, so they didn't actually swallow the saliva that their mouth was producing over 3 hours, the nitrite in their blood didn't increase, but when they swallowed their saliva, it did. So this just highlighted that the enterosalivary circulation was extremely important in converting nitrate to nitrite. And we now know that it's bacteria in the mouth which are responsible for this reduction. So that's nitrate to nitrite. And then further to that, nitrite was acknowledged to be able to be reduced further to nitric oxide. So basically we established this nitrate, nitrite, nitric oxide pathway. So this second step, so nitrite to nitric oxide, is either catalyzed by xanthine oxidase in tissue and red blood cells, or by deoxyhemoglobin in skeletal muscle. And this nitrate, nitrite, nitric oxide pathway is now pretty well established in the field. So I just want to kind of summarize everything that I've said, because I know it can be a lot to take in. So essentially you consume something high in nitrate, beetroot, for example, and actually quite a significant proportion of this is just excreted into the urine. So probably about 2/3 of it is, but the rest of it's concentrated into the enterosalivary circulation. So then it comes back into the mouth through the salivary glands, and bacteria in the back of the mouth then reduce that nitrate to nitrite, which you swallow, and then in circulation, so systemically, this nitrite is then reduced further to nitric oxide. And as I mentioned already, nitric oxide is a known vasodilator. So if this is happening, then surely inorganic nitrate from dietary sources is able to induce favourable cardiovascular effects. So the next kind of part of my talk is looking at exactly this question: does nitrate, nitrite, nitric oxide pathway exhibit cardiovascular benefits? And the simple answer to that is yes, otherwise I wouldn't be here talking about the topic. And by far the majority of this research has focused at the moment on blood pressure, although this is starting to move a little bit now. And this, I guess, was one of the key seminal papers in dietary nitrate research. So they fed people either nitrate-rich beetroot juice or nitrate-free beetroot juice, and you can see here the nitrate-rich, which is the black squares, increased the amount of nitrate and nitrite in the plasma, so circulating around the body, and you can see here reduced both systolic and diastolic blood pressure, so increased circulating nitric oxide and reduced blood pressure. So perfect. And this has been shown time and time again. This is pretty well established now that inorganic nitrate from dietary sources can reduce blood pressure. And if we can reduce blood pressure, as I said at the beginning, as blood pressure is a key risk factor for cardiovascular disease, we're in turn reducing cardiovascular disease. So dietary nitrate could be extremely important. Now, I mentioned a lot of the research is focused around blood pressure. There's still a hell of a lot of research to be done. First of all, the majority of research is looking at acute responses, and what I mean by this is they feed somebody beetroot and they look at what happens in the immediate period after feeding them that. So in the 3 hours after them consuming the beetroot juice. But this is not a kind of typical day-to-day response. You know, you eat other things, you may have beetroot one day, not the next day, but the following day. You may have beetroot every day for years and years and years, and we don't really know what the effect of that is. The responses may be different depending on a number of different factors. So what your blood pressure is to start with, whether you're a man or a woman, if you have any underlying health conditions. And as I mentioned at the beginning, there's very few chronic trials. So there's very few trials which feed people beetroot juice daily or inorganic nitrate daily for long periods of times. And why this is particularly important is because with organic nitrate, so the nitrate that I spoke about right at the beginning, which is used in GTN, tolerance effects are observed. So if you took GTN every day, it stops working. And we don't really know very well if this is the case for inorganic nitrate as well. But I'm going to present a couple of sets of data which kind of pull apart some of these points in the next slides. So first of all, looking at the difference between men and women, and this was a study by the same group this is kind of the key group in the nitrate field, who looked at, they ran actually a study and then decided to do a sub-analysis in the differences between men and women. And what they found was at the beginning of the trial, women had lower blood pressure, but they also had lower nitrite, which suggests that they actually had lower circulating nitric oxide in their body. When they were given the beetroot juice, however, the nitrate and nitrite increased more in the women, but the blood pressure reduced more in the men, and it's very complicated. It could be something to do with hormonal differences from men to women, and this is an area which I'm looking at the moment because there's potentially some interaction between nitric oxide and its metabolites and female hormones. So this is a very strange result, and this absolutely warrants more research. Secondly, the impact on people with type 2 diabetes is another interesting conundrum, let's say. So what I mean by type 2 diabetes is a chronic condition where individuals have decreased insulin function, and you need insulin in your body to get rid of glucose. So if you have decreased insulin function, you're going to accumulate lots of glucose in your body, which is not desirable. It can lead to all sorts of complications. So there haven't been that many trials in patients with type 2 diabetes, but the couple that have been done, and I'll talk a bit about some work that I've done in type 2 diabetes as well in a couple of slides' time, showed that although consuming dietary nitrate increases nitrite, so potentially increases nitric oxide, people with type 2 diabetes don't see that consequential reduction in blood pressure for some reason. More recently, though, an interesting finding, so just last year was found, and this is the group that I was working with at King's College London, and they found that actually dietary nitrate, so consuming beetroot juice, did although it didn't have effects on blood pressure, did decrease insulin clearance. So by reducing the insulin clearance, you then make glucose clearance more effective. So this is a desirable effect. So it could have benefits in other ways, not just blood pressure. And then finally, the chronic effects, so the effects of inorganic nitrate over time. As I mentioned, there are tolerance effects seen with organic nitrate, but it doesn't seem to be the case with inorganic nitrate. And there aren't very many studies that look, this one only looks for 15 days, but you can see here sustained increases in plasma nitrate, in nitrite, and sustained reductions in blood pressure over those 15 days. So it looks promising. It looks like there isn't a tolerance effect that we see with organic nitrate. And sorry, just going back to this slide, and I'll talk a bit about our VaSera trial, which is a very long chronic trial in organic nitrate in a few slides' time. And there are other improvements as well. So it's not all about blood pressure. There are absolutely other improvements as well. Inhibiting platelet aggregation, so reducing the chance of thrombosis and clots forming in the blood. Improvements in endothelial function, so looking at how well the endothelium is functioning in peripheral arteries, and also reducing arterial stiffness. And all these things are also risk factors for cardiovascular disease. So if we can improve these things here with inorganic nitrate, then we're onto a winner for reducing the incidence of cardiovascular disease. So that's a bit about the background. I'm going to talk a bit about some of my own research or research that I've been involved with. And the first thing is this VaSera trial. So this is what I worked on when I was working at King's College London under the supervision of Professor Cruikshank and Dr. Andy Webb. And we carried out the longest trial to date in inorganic nitrate, so beetroot juice. We fed people with or at risk of type 2 diabetes nitrate every single day for 6 months, the poor participants. And so far we've got 3 publications from this work, and we have a couple more coming on the way as well. And I'll just talk through some of those results. So it was a double-blinded controlled randomized controlled trial. I have to just be upfront, it was a factorial design. So as well as looking at inorganic nitrate, we were also looking at the efficacy of some a drug treatment, because my bosses at the time were both clinicians, and they had interest in not only dietary means for improving health, but also drugs as well. So it was a factorial design, but I'm only going to speak about the nitrate side here. And we gave people beetroot juice, so up to or less than 10 millimoles of nitrate every day, or they had, excuse me, an identical nitrate-free juice daily. So this is kind of what the trial looked like. We had men and women, we had any age, and basically the main criteria was that they either had been diagnosed with or they were at risk of type 2 diabetes. And that their renal function, so the function of their kidneys, wasn't too disastrous, because we didn't want to add any more complications to that. But basically people came in, we took their blood pressure and took a whole host of biological samples, and we did that at the beginning, at the middle, so around about 12 weeks, and at the end. And at that 12-week point, if things were going well, if the participants were tolerating the juice, we increased the dose at that point. And at each visit we took a whole host of different measures. So we took blood pressure, we looked at arterial stiffness, we also gave some of the participants cardiac ultrasound. So we used ultrasound to look at how well their heart's functioning and what the structure of their heart looked like. And very few of the participants, so of the 120 that we recruited, about 10 of them we also gave cardiac MRI scans to look at how well their heart was working. So what did we see from this? Well, contrary to our hypothesis, which was that we would see reductions in arterial stiffness, we saw no change in arterial stiffness or in blood pressure. And actually this no change in blood pressure is very much in line with all the work that's been done in type 2 diabetes before. We saw an increase in circulating nitrate, but we didn't see any effects on peripheral blood pressure. So this is the blood pressure that you have if you go to the hospital on the top of your arm. What we did see, however, and this is presented in these graphs here, along with this increase in circulating nitrate, we saw significant differences between the nitrate containing and the nitrate-free beetroot juices in central blood pressure. So this is the pressure of the aorta, so the pressure of the main artery coming away from the heart, which is arguably, although it's not done routinely in clinic, a good marker of how well the heart's working. So this is an extremely important result, and it suggests that perhaps there is some kind of targeted pressure reducing in this population of people, so in type 2 diabetes patients. And another exciting result was, so right at the bottom here, we also saw improvements in heart structure and function. So you can see here, this is just an example of an echocardiogram, the ultrasound we looked at, we saw improvements there. So that's the VaSera trial. The next one I want to speak about is another one that was introduced at the beginning. It's the where I looked at the impact of grapefruit juice and nitrate. So, okay, it's brilliant that inorganic nitrate improves or reduces blood pressure, but is there any way we can make this even better? And some people are carrying out research in this field. There's been a little bit on vitamin C, which looks quite promising. And I guess for me, another interesting area is the interaction between polyphenols and nitrate. And this table is taken from a paper we published in 2016, which is a review of nitrate and health. And since publishing that paper, there's also been some work by Günter Kuhnler and his group, who's now a colleague of mine at the University of Reading, looking at interactions between sulfur and nitrate, and they saw something quite interesting in the EPIC studies, which is just an observational trial, and they saw that people who had low sulfur consumptions from their diet, so people who had low sulfur consumption, blood pressure was negatively associated with nitrate. So people who had low sulfur had beneficial effects, more beneficial effects of nitrate compared to people who had high sulfur. So it seems to be favourable to have this low sulfur diet with regards to the impact of dietary nitrate on blood pressure, which is an interesting finding in itself. So what we decided to look at was grapefruit juice, and so first of all, this enzyme, the CYP3A4 enzyme, is an enzyme that's in our body. It's working all the time, and it basically removes toxins from our body. It's very important, and drugs. So if you take a drug, you don't want that drug hanging around in your body forever. You want it to be got rid of from your body after it's done what it needs to do, and it's this enzyme which is playing a key role in doing that. And it was actually discovered that by accident, but it's been proven subsequently in the 90s that grapefruit juice was able to inhibit this enzyme. So there was something in grapefruit juice, perhaps fruanocoumarin, which inhibited this enzyme from working, and therefore made an accumulation of some drugs. So there are a number of drugs which you're recommended not to consume grapefruit juice with if you're taking them. So we wondered if it would have the same effect on inorganic nitrate, and something that supported this hypothesis was that this drug here, this antibiotic trandomycin, which is a CYP inhibitor, also inhibits nitrite oxidation. So it inhibits this pathway here. So it inhibits from nitrite to nitrate, which basically pushes the reaction back in this way and perhaps increases circulating nitric oxide, although this is only in one animal trial that this has been seen. But we thought, why not give it a go in humans and see what happens? So just to summarize why we did this, we obviously have the nitrate, nitrite, nitric oxide pathway from beetroot or inorganic nitrate. If something within grapefruit, perhaps its fruanocoumarins, are able to inhibit the oxidations, they're able to inhibit this backwards pathway, so the nitric oxide, nitrite, nitrate, perhaps if you give them both together in this kind of grapefruit beetroot cocktail, we can see enhanced blood pressure lowering effects. So we set out to test this in healthy participants. we carried out another randomized controlled trial, took various blood samples, saliva samples, and blood pressure, and we gave them either on one day beetroot juice with grapefruit juice, on another day beetroot juice with water, and on the third day they had the control, so the nitrate-free beetroot juice with grapefruit. And these are the results, and I'll just talk you through these relatively quickly. So what we saw was that, as we expected, if you give people inorganic nitrate as beetroot juice, healthy people, you see a reduction in blood pressure. In addition to this, what we saw was exactly what we thought we were going to see, and that is that if you give it to them with grapefruit juice, you see an even better reduction in blood pressure. So hooray, we've seen exactly what we thought. However, when we looked at circulating nitrite, so looking at how much, a marker of how much nitric oxide is in the body, we saw that it increased with beetroot juice and even increased with the beetroot juice with grapefruit. But the increase of nitrite with the grapefruit juice wasn't as much as what we observed with the beetroot juice alone. So it wasn't mirroring what we saw with the blood pressure, which was a bit of a conundrum. So why was that? So initially, our hypothesis was that it was the furanocoumarins interfering with the reaction, but it doesn't seem to be the case because we didn't see this subsequent increase in circulating nitrite as well. We also considered perhaps it's sulfurs within grapefruit juice, but according to the Kuhnler publications, probably not. And so we're left with a couple of options. And one thing that is extremely feasible is that that vitamin C may play a role. But if it was vitamin C, we'd probably see an increase in as vitamin C is an antioxidant, we would expect to see an increase in circulating nitric oxide as well. And we didn't see that, although this warrants a bit more research. Something which I guess catches my eye the most is this interaction between nitrate and polyphenols. And so somebody that both Jana and I work with at Reading, Anna Rodriguez, has done a lot of work on polyphenols, and she published a paper on the interaction between nitrate and cocoa polyphenols. And it seems that combining those together gives you enhanced beneficial effects in the vascular system, and grapefruit is extremely high in polyphenols. And so I think this is an area which I would like to focus some attention to see what's going on. So finally, it may seem like I'm going on a bit of a tangent now, but I wanted to just introduce some of the work that I've done on nitrogen dioxide. So you can see here this picture on the right hand side is a very polluted photo of central London. And air pollution is an extremely big issue for us at the moment, and nitrogen dioxide is a key constituent of air pollution, and air pollution we know is associated with adverse health effects. The impact of air pollution on cardiovascular health is a bit controversial. There doesn't seem to be much agreement, and one of the reasons for this might be is that talking about air pollution is not very helpful because it's made up of a whole host of different things: carbon monoxide, particulate matter, sulfur dioxide, and nitrogen dioxide and its metabolites. So it's very difficult to prize these things apart when you're talking about air pollution in general. What caught my eye with nitrogen dioxide is obviously it's structurally very similar to inorganic nitrite, NO2 and NO2 minus. And this data from although there's not very much research in this at all, data back in the 80s suggests that humans exposed to 0.1 parts per million of nitrogen dioxide formed about 3.6 milligrams of nitrite in the body. And this is way, way, way in excess of what we see from dietary sources. So then we started to think, well, perhaps nitrogen dioxide in air pollution could be a source of nitric oxide. And so we've done, at the moment, just a very small pilot trial looking at that. So initially we set out to put our participants, walk them around the streets of London and following buses on bikes and all sorts of things to expose them to air pollution. But actually in the UK, gas cooking is extremely common way of cooking, and is one of the key sources of nitrogen dioxide. And the beauty of using gas cooking is that you see nitrogen dioxide, but you don't necessarily see all of the other confounding factors. So you don't necessarily see particulate matter and carbon monoxide. So what we ended up doing was sitting our participants in front of a cooker, which was lit for an hour and a half, or in a lounge which we controlled for temperature to make sure that the temperature was the same, and we took blood samples from them as throughout the hour and a half that they sat there. And what we saw was, I guess, a little bit surprising, because I kind of thought this is a great hypothesis, but is it really gonna work? And it did. So we saw increased plasma nitrite, so suggesting that inhaling nitrogen dioxide just by sitting next to a gas cooker increased the amount of nitrite and nitric oxide in the blood, but also reduced blood pressure. So, I mean, this was a very interesting finding. It was picked up by the UK media, and I guess I want to be careful in the way I'm presenting this, because I'm not suggesting that nitrogen dioxide or air pollution is going to be a remedy for cardiovascular disease. For me, interestingly, it may confound some of the dietary research. If one of my participants comes in through very busy roads, it could mess around with some of my results. And also it adds to the body of evidence for air pollution and health, and kind of contributes to understanding a little bit more about what's going on. But definitely I wouldn't suggest sitting behind a diesel exhaust to try and reduce your risk of cardiovascular disease. And then I just want to finish off by talking about a study that we have coming up. So obviously COVID-19 is being a pain for all of us across the world. I don't think there's a country that is really escaping that. And we are planning a trial, so we have funding to carry out a trial looking at the impact of nitrate on long COVID. So this is we're hoping to start that next year with ethical approval pending. So if you're not familiar with the concept of long COVID, it's basically where somebody has suffered with the COVID virus, but their symptoms persist long term. So they don't just shake off the symptoms after the 15 days or whatever the normal window is. These patients have a long-term effect or detrimental effect of having had COVID. And in some of the patients that have suffered with long COVID, they have resultant reduced heart function. So their heart doesn't seem to be working quite as it was before they had COVID. So what we're going to look at is if inorganic nitrate can repair, in inverted commas, the damage done by COVID. And this is really taking the work that we did in that big, long VaSera trial, where we saw improvements in cardiac structure and function, and looking at that in COVID patients. So we'll be giving our patients beetroot juice to consume daily for 3 months, and before and after their beetroot intervention, we'll give them cardiac MRI scans. So we'll put them in the MRI scanner and look at what their heart looks like and how well it's functioning. So I guess I have to finish off by talking about this, because it's always asked as a question to me, and I just feel like I have to stick up for myself. So basically, from everything I've been saying, perhaps the conclusion is, okay, so nitrate's brilliant. We consume nitrate, it's found in green leafy vegetables, it's reduced to nitrite. Nitrite is reduced to nitric oxide. It does wonderful things to our cardiovascular system. Yeah, brilliant. And it will be very easy to finish the talk there, but I just want to acknowledge at this final point, we also consume a lot of nitrite in our diet. So nitrate in green leafy vegetables. Nitrite is also used in the curing of meats. So if you consume meat, you may well consume a lot of nitrite. And there's a lot of controversy surrounding processed meats and carcinogenic effects of consuming those meats. And that's due to the formation of nitrosamines in the stomach. So as we saw from that diagram with the moving kind of images, that circulating that nitrite is consumed and enters into the stomach, and it's here where these nitrosamines, which are carcinogenic, are formed. And I just want to kind of explain a bit more about this. Although indeed nitrite is associated with nitrosamine formation, and as a consequence, inorganic nitrate could also be associated with this, it seems that nitrate and nitrite consumed from fruit and vegetables doesn't seem to exhibit this same level of nitrosamine production, and this is potentially because there's vitamin C there present, which gives us some kind of natural protection. But moreover, I think probably the key point is that when you consume nitrite in meat, you're consuming that nitrite with a huge dose of protein as well. And as the name suggests, nitrosamines, you need this protein for this compound formation. And so when you consume your nitrite with a dose of protein, this is when you kind of meet some issues and see nitrosamine these carcinogenic formations in the stomach. And so I guess I just want to put your mind at rest. If you're worried that we're feeding people tons and tons of nitrate and you're thinking, oh my God, you're producing all these carcinogens, what are you doing? Actually, the World Cancer Research Foundation also agrees that nitrate from fruits and vegetables doesn't seem to have the same effect on nitrosamine production as that from meat with a protein source. So just to summarize the talk really, so inorganic or dietary nitrate, as it's sometimes termed, exhibits beneficial effects on vascular health via the nitrate-nitrite-nitric oxide pathway. This is well established. It seems that these effects do remain after chronic consumption, unlike what happens with organic nitrate. They can be enhanced by different things, and I think that this interaction between nitrate and polyphenols is one that warrants a good amount of attention, as well as the impact of air pollution. Air pollution may confound some of these dietary studies, and the nitrogen dioxide might not be the detrimental component of air pollution. And finally, as I just mentioned, nitrate from vegetables doesn't seem to be connected to stomach cancer as nitrite from meat sources. So it leaves me just to say thank you. I didn't have enough room. I don't think I would ever have had enough room on the slides to mention every single person by name. I have to give a special thanks to Prof. Cruikshank and Dr. Webb, who I worked with at King's College, and a lot of this work was done there. And all of the teams that were involved in all of that research. There were multidisciplinary and huge teams, and the work couldn't have been done with the contribution of each and every one of those people. And also I want to just give a name check to, this is my PhD student Begum, who's going to be working on the nitrate and COVID trial. So thank you. That's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Charlotte. It's a very interesting talk on the dietary nitrate. Okay, let's move to Q&A session. I have already some question to pose to you. The first question is, I think it's about the confounding factor of the nitrate effect. I mean, here the question is, when you did the study in beetroot, and how can you be sure that it is the nitrate per se that affect the lowering the blood pressure, not the other compound?
So that's a fair point. And up until relatively recently, it was difficult to determine that. Now, this company who makes beetroot juice, they're called Beet It, they're producing a beetroot juice in which is identical in every way. So the same amount of vitamin C, the same amount of carbohydrates. The only difference is the reduction of nitrate from the juice. So we can do a very, very well controlled trial where we are feeding people either nitrate containing or an identical juice which has the nitrate removed. So we can be sure now that it is the nitrate, and pairing that with the biological sample analysis. We can look at how much nitrate is found in the blood, in the saliva, in the urine. We analyze all the biological samples just to be sure that what we think is happening is actually happening.
Thank you. And for another question from Ibu Maria from University of Lampung. She asked about the beetroot consumption, daily consumption. She has normal blood pressure, and she consumes regularly the beetroot. Do you think that for normal person, I mean, she means for a person who has normal blood pressure, it affects the blood pressure, and then she knows that salt content also it affect the blood pressure. What do you say?
Yeah, so to comment on the final point about salt and blood pressure, absolutely. I mean, salt is unequivocally one of the key issues with blood pressure. We eat too much salt. In the UK at least, our salt consumption is in excess of the maximum limits that are suggested by our government, and we have to reduce our salt content. Our food industry are doing a fantastic job of doing that in our processed foods, because the majority of our salt is coming from processed foods, not from us adding salt to food ourselves. And so that's an absolutely valid point. I think we shouldn't overlook that, you know, it's not a one nutrient to solve everything. It's multifactorial, this problem of high blood pressure. With regards to consuming or eating beetroot as a healthy individual, I wouldn't want to dissuade anybody from consuming fruits and vegetables. And so, nitrate aside, it's good that you have lots of fruits and vegetables. If this is going to come from beetroot or green leafy vegetables, fantastic. What the data that we have so far shows that there are moderate reductions in healthy individuals in blood pressure. In our trials, we never use a participant who's hypotensive, so anyone who is suffering with low blood pressure, so under 90 millimeters of mercury, because it just wouldn't be ethical to do that. And so I can't say what happens to those people, but we have never seen any adverse effects in healthy individuals consuming nitrate despite lowering of their blood pressure. So we see that it's effective in people who are healthy, but actually what the evidence suggests that if you have high blood pressure, so if you're hypertensive, the reductions in blood pressure seem to be even more dramatic.
Okay, and I think I want to relate your response to the salt consumption. When you did the research on the effect of nitrate from beetroot, for example, did you control the volunteers to salt consumption or not consumption?
I mean, we try as much as possible. So when we're doing a short trial, it's a bit easier because you can say to somebody, don't eat anything that's going to affect your blood pressure. So control the amount of salt you have, don't drink loads of alcohol, don't do loads of exercise, don't go crazy eating loads of beetroot and spinach and whatever before you come to us. In a short-term trial, it's very easy. You tell somebody not to do it for a couple of days and they can manage doing that. When you have a longer-term trial, it becomes more complicated because you can't ask somebody not to eat any fruit and vegetables for 6 months. So we ask them to try and keep your diet as consistent as possible. And we took dietary assessment from these participants to check, and as far as they reported, okay, there are issues with dietary assessment, which I could talk about for a long time. They're not the most accurate way of recording what people are eating, but it seemed like they kept their diets as consistent as possible, and it's the best that you can do. Dietary clinicians hate it when I say this, but dietary research is very complicated because you're not eating just one nutrient, you're eating whole foods, and many foods are containing these nutrients. So it's not like you just give one pill and you look at the effect. It's a much bigger, more complicated science, if I may. I hope there's no clinicians.
And then there's another questions about from Ibu Mariam. She asked about the nitrate content in daily diet. What is the optimum dose?
I don't think
For
we
someone
know
who
that.
has cardiovascular disease, for someone who has
So I think it's difficult to say the optimal dose. It probably, and I don't know, depends on a number of factors like their BMI, so how big they are. As you saw, there are a number of different confounding factors. So if you have diabetes, if you're a man or if you're a woman. But despite that, we've seen reductions in blood pressure in as little, well, in a couple of portions of beetroot per day. So the equivalent of 2 portions of beetroot per day is enough to see reductions in blood pressure. So, you know, it's 2 80-gram portions should be enough if you can stomach it. But you can get it. I mean, actually, spinach is much higher in nitrate gram per gram than beetroot. It's just not as easy to research with. So you could probably even get away with eating less spinach.
I think this is the similar question, but it's about the vitamin C. Considering that you say this is from Mr. Susiladi, what is the optimum dose of vitamin C intake for elder person?
For
this about blood pressure, because you said that there's a correlation between vitamin C and nitrate.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question, and I don't think there's been a hell of a lot of research around it. I think a lot of it is speculation. So we kind of assume, we know vitamin C is an antioxidant, and so I think a lot of it is speculation, and I think this study that we've done in grapefruit juice could be one of the kind of key paths to starting that research as a bit more of an established kind of research field. In that trial, we gave them 1 glass of 250 milliliters of grapefruit juice. So it's like a standard portion that you would have, and if the effects were due to vitamin C, then that's quite exciting. But we need to look more into that.
It's interesting. Okay, there is also we have still time, I think. Yeah, MC. There are still a couple of questions. Do you mind if I ask Dr. Charlotte some questions, some other questions?
Yes, there's still have a time. You still have time.
Okay. This is a question from Ibu Endang Sriwati. As you presented before, that the nitrate application in food processing, like in sausage, for example, is often used. But then maybe she's now wondering if it's still acceptable to use nitrate in the food processing, for example, maybe in UK or in Europe in general. Do you know?
I want to point you to a colleague of mine. So Dr. Günther Kuhnler is doing a lot of research in this, and he's been doing a lot of work looking at nitrite alternatives to meat preservation, and he's been actually I mean, I work in polyphenols, a lot of us do in the department, but he's been looking at things like polyphenols as a solution to reducing the need for use of nitrite. I think that there is kind of a trend away from nitrite, that cured meat and red meat in general has had a very bad press. I don't know if it's the same in Indonesia, but in the UK, people are really kind of moving away from meat in general, but specifically red meat and processed meat. And so I think if we can find a solution to this, a nitrite alternative, I think people will be a lot happier to continue to consume these kind of meats. But it's if you can find a solution, you're going to become a millionaire probably at the moment.
You're right. I hope I can be the one.
Me too.
Okay, there is still another question. It's what about the processing effects on the nitrate content? We cook, for example, vegetable.
Yeah, so there hasn't been much in that field. So Begum, who's the PhD student who's working on this COVID trial, is is considering having a look at that. I mean, nitrate is soluble, and so if you're boiling it, so beetroot juice actually, when it comes out of beetroot out of the ground, is rock hard. It's like a potato. And so when you buy it in the supermarket or it's in a salad or something, it's been boiled. And I'm sure that boiling it is going to reduce the nitrate content because it's going to leach into the water. It's soluble. Similarly, the growing conditions, if it's a very wet condition, it's probably going to wash a lot of it away rather than retaining it into the vegetable. And so I think there's a lot to be said about cooking, processing. I think Begum will have a look at different types of processing. So what happens with juicing, for example. So if you're pasteurizing the juice, or if it's a cold press, is there differences in nitrate concentration? Is there differences between boiled beetroot juice, beetroot, and fried beetroot? So at the moment, there's a trend in the UK with beetroot crisps. So instead of using potato to make kind of chips, we're making them from vegetables, including beetroot. And so it'd be interesting to see if these are actually a viable source of nitrate, because at the moment we don't really know. But it's quite trendy at the moment, beetroot in the UK. They're making all sorts of very strange products from beetroot. It's a pretty color, but it doesn't, in my opinion, taste amazing.
I want to relate your response to the beetroot product, for example. I know if we talk about polyphenol, for example, the bioavailability of polyphenol is affected by protein, for example, or even sugar. So do you know if when we have a product from beetroot and we add sugar, it affects the effectivity of?
I don't know. I think this is what I mean by the complexity of diet and nutrition research. You have to consider the food matrix, and that's one thing that's really not been done at the moment in the field of nitrate. And I think one of the reasons for this is that the field has been driven by clinicians, and actually they haven't really had that. Nutritional scientists have not really had that much kind of stand in the field. And I think you make a fantastic point. We have to consider the food matrix. If we're making a product, if we're making a beetroot, so one thing you can do with beetroot is make a chocolate cake. If we're making a chocolate cake and we're adding sugar and we're adding fat, is this going to have the same effect? Can we then start promoting chocolate cake as something that's good for cardiovascular health? I don't know. I mean, we have to think of the big picture, and I think you make a really good point.
It's very complex.
It's very complex.
Depends on the food matrix as well. Yeah. And well, I'm really interested in when you presented the effect of nitrate on people with diabetes. There is an increase in the nitrite or nitrate concentration, the increase, but you didn't see any effect on the lowering blood pressure. Does it mean that there is inhibition of reduction from nitrate to nitrate, or nitrite to nitric oxide, for example?
That is so hard to determine because it's so hard to measure nitric oxide as is. One way we do it sometimes is by looking at exhaled nitric oxides, the amount of nitric oxide in the breath, assuming that it comes back from the stomach out in the mouth, but it's not really a good way of measuring the levels in circulation. So in the blood, for example, this phenomenon that we see in type 2 diabetes, where they see increases of nitrite, I would assume that if you see increases of nitrite, it means there's increased nitric oxide in the body, because you have to remember that nitric oxide is also oxidized back to nitrite. And so there's kind of like this relationship between this pathway that goes both ways. I think it's something else, but what it is, I don't know. Why are we not seeing reductions in blood pressure with type 2 diabetes? And it's probably something more underlying, like metabolic health issue that's for some reason making nitric oxide not effective. I should just highlight that in people with type 2 diabetes, they have an excess prevalence of cardiovascular disease. So cardiovascular disease, if you have type 2 diabetes, it seems to come hand in hand with cardiovascular disease. So it could be that type 2 diabetes has some kind of impairment in nitric oxide production anyway. And so us giving them more, it doesn't help them because nitric oxide is not functioning properly in their bodies perhaps, but we don't know. But this result with diabetes has been seen time and time again, that we see an increase in nitrite, but we don't see an increase, reduction in blood pressure. It's a strange outcome.
Okay, I see. Okay, this is the last one, Dr. Charlotte. I think it's from Mr. Agus Drajat. I think his question is about the side effect of consuming dietary nitrate. Is there any?
So not that we've seen. So the main side effect, if you can call it a side effect, is that in some people it makes their urine turn pink. And in our big trial, it's called beta-nuria. And in our big trial, we recorded all of the effects. So 120 people consuming beetroot juice every day for 6 months. And the main thing that we saw with people was that their wee went pink. But other than that, I mean, we really didn't see any effects in the population that we looked at. I mean, it's very difficult to make a sweeping statement that there's no side effects in anyone. I guess if your blood pressure is already quite low and you take a lot of beetroot juice, you could be in danger of hypotension, so reduction in blood pressure. So you might see a bit of dizziness, but we haven't seen anything, dramatic, unless somebody is, for example, allergic to beetroot, but, it's very rare.
Okay, I think that was the last question from our audience. I would like to thank to Dr. Charlotte. It was really an amazing presentation. Before closing our presentation, let me draw a conclusion from today's presentation. Dietary nitrate exhibits beneficial effects on vascular function via nitrate, nitrite, and nitric oxide pathway. Nitrate is reduced to nitrite in oral cavity and then further reduced to nitric oxide in gastric acidic milieu in stomach. Studies show that dietary nitrate reduce blood pressure and also other beneficial effects such as inhibition of platelet aggregation, improvement in endothelial function, reducing arterial stiffness. And then there are also some factors which affect the effectivity of dietary nitrate, such as sex and diabetes. And then also the speaker highlight the possibility of the interaction between nitrate with other compound present in food matrix. Okay, I would like to thank Dr. Charlotte Mills. I'm really grateful to you. This lecture was really amazing.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's really, really amazing to have you here. And I would like also thank to the committee of this webinar. Thank you to everyone on the webinar for attending this lecture, for being an incredibly engaged audience. Then, okay, I think so for this presentation, as my role as moderator, I think I will end here and I will give back the chance to MC. Please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Riana, for guiding this general lecture. And thank you very much, Dr. Charlotte, for your time and for knowledge which have been given to us. And dear audience, please give an applause to both of our guests by clicking the applause reaction. It's a virtual applause. And well, moving right along, now is the submission of certificates. The Food Technology Study Program would like to present the certificate of appreciation for our speaker and moderator today. The first is for Dr. Charlotte Mills. Yes, we ordered to you the certificate as our speaker today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
And the second is for our moderator today, Ms. Tariana Cahyana, PhD. Yes, the certificate we awarded to you as our moderator today. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, Ms. Tariana.
Thank you.
Once again, thank you very much. And this e-certificate, we'll send it via email. And ladies and gentlemen, now we come to the end of this event. To close this event, let's say Hamdalah together. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. And last but not least, we would like to convey our deepest appreciation for all of your support and participations. And finally, I'm Amani Hilmi. It has been my pleasure to host this event. And from the deepest of my heart, I would like to apologize if there were mistakes. And thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you, Dr. Charlotte, for your presentation.
You're welcome. No, it was nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you too. I hope one day I can go to Reading.
You must. You have to come back. And I hope one day I can come to Indonesia when all this is over.
Yeah, when this COVID is over, you are welcome.
We'll be there.
Thank you, Dr. Charlotte.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you, Dr. Charlotte. Thank you.
Take care. Nice to see you all.
Nice to see you too.
Oh.
Makasih semuanya, semua panitia Pak Yana, makasih ya.
Terima kasih Pak Yana. Ya,
terima kasih Pak Yana.
Sama-sama, terima kasih.
Ya.
Terima kasih semuanya.
Ya Bu, sama-sama. Pamit izin oleh Bu. Assalamualaikum.
Salam.
Terima kasih Pak Yana, Amani.
Terima kasih. Samsul, makasih ya sudah bantuin. Amani, terima kasih.
Nanti next semester ada lagi. Semester depan kita cari lagi.
Masih ada stok Bu, mau orang Spanyol, mau orang Turki Bu.
Itu Pak, yang Prancis juga ada kan?
Ada, Prancis belum tuh.
Nah, kita arrange semester depan lah ya. Yo. Makasih ya Pak Yana ya.
Ya, sama-sama Bu.
Yo, Assalamualaikum.
Sertifikat akan dibagikan 1 minggu setelah hari H ya, untuk peserta.
Siap. Bu, yang itu sudah ya, account.
Udah besok.
Ya. Terima kasih ya, saya live. Ya, saya live ya.
Dadah Bapak. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih Bapak Ibu, Amani juga live ya Bu.
Ya, makasih Amani ya.
Makasih